In my last video, I explained that while we as a human society have placed rationality on a pedestal as being a great virtue, it doesn't always fit into our world as we live in an irrational universe. This can be concerning to many as their worldviews are based on science, logic and reason, and when I first learned about this, I had a bit of an existential crisis. How am I supposed to live in a world in which the world does not care about my actions? What is the point of anything when it all dies in the end? Or some random event produces better results than me trying my very best? Do I have any kind of control on the outside world whatsoever? So, we live in an irrational world where our society pushes us to be as rational as possible. What options are there for dealing with living in an irrational world where we can't try and use reason? Fortunately, there have been other people who have fallen into this pit of thought before. We can take a look at their thoughts on the matter to gain more insight on how we may adapt our lives in a world of chaos. Soren Kirkegaard is one such figure who realized the absurdity of the world and tried to battle it. Kirkegaard came to the conclusion that the world is irrational as he believed that since we are free beings, we are able to choose whatever we want to do in life. There are an infinite number of choices to make, and because there are so many choices at every moment in life, analysis paralysis can take over. How can one possibly make the right decision when there are an infinite amount of possible decisions to make? This is where Kierkegaard's famous quote, "Anxiety is the dizziness of freedom," comes from. I think it's safe to say that most of us dislike the feeling of anxiety, and having to choose what to do at every moment of our lives isn't much fun either. So we live by conventions, copy what our peers do, and follow the shepherd. And in the era of the influences, more and more we're finding our shepherds to hurt us. Kierkegaard battles this by believing that one must have a leap of faith. He was a strong believer in Christ. However, he also acknowledged that there are many parts of Christianity that do not rationally work. As such, he believed that we must put aside rationality and believe in subjective truths. It is off these subjective truths that Kierkegaard bases his attack towards the irrational world, to have faith in the face of irrationality, as faith is higher than reason. Kierkegaard believed that this, living by subjective truths, is the only way to confront the irrational world. While for him this was Christianity, it can come in the form of anything that one may be passionate about, as long as they completely devote themselves to it. This is in opposition to living by the status quo that is so easy. Instead, one must think for themselves and find their own truth for which they are willing to die for. Russian writer Fyodor Dostoevsky took a similar stance toward the irrationality of the world. In my previous video, I referenced Dostoevsky's book, Notes from the Underground, with the intention of demonstrating how Dostoevsky viewed the growing rationality as problematic. During his time, the Industrial Revolution was transforming the world, and science, logic and reason were beginning to replace previous conventions, mainly that of religion. Dostoevsky disapproved of total rationality as he believed that a moral conscience cannot be replaced by rationality, putting his faith in God rather than man. And religion is a pretty good option for dealing with an irrational world. It provides a guideline, a purpose, and meaning that can't be found through rational frameworks, such as science. For thousands of years, humans have utilized religion to help us make sense of the world, and it helps billions of people to this day. And we can even see that in our modern day, with faith in religion at an all-time low, and with secularism becoming the new norm, there are many who feel lost and without purpose. As such, replacements for religion have begun to be more popular, and what are seen as rational and logical groups are gaining more spiritual ties to fill this gap. And if being a part of such groups provides your life with a semblance of meaning, guidance or purpose, then more power to you. It's quite obvious that religious institutions have many deep-rooted flaws, and that stops a lot of people from joining what were once seen as prestigious institutions. So it is fine if you can find and utilize alternatives to help you. However, many in this day and age do not want to involve themselves in any kind of spirituality, as they see it as completely irrational, and that is fine as well. There are many atheists who find things like humanism to provide them with enough meaning. Another famous Russian writer, Leo Tolstoy, has also tackled the problem of irrationality in the world. His book, A Confession, is an autobiography that deals with his perceived meaningless of life. Initially, he believed that by working hard, surrounding oneself with the right people, and solving philosophical problems of life, he may be content and at peace. However, he never seemed to find this satisfaction, and continued to believe that by having and achieving more and more will he finally be happy. Finally realizing this never-ending cycle, he became despaired about the apparent meaninglessness of life. Tolstoy describes 4 possible responses to the absurdity of life. These are ignorance, that is, not accepting reality as it is and pretending that there isn't a problem at all, and that life does have meaning somewhere. Pleasure, either in an Epicurean or hedonist way, trying to maximize the amount of pleasure possible within life so that you at least can have a good time while you're here. Unaliving yourself, which is pretty simple there. Or continue living despite everything and letting life drag on. While he explains that the unaliving option felt the most logical, he ended up opting for the last one, deciding that religion, much like Kirkegaard and Dostoevsky, was the one true way to battle the irrationality of the world. He further explains how he lost faith in science as believing in such truths is bizarre in an irrational world, and that the answer to the meaning of life exists outside of reason, and that only faith can bring meaning. However, even then, he was disappointed, like many others, by the behaviours of Christians in power for not practicing what they preached and believed that only the simple faith of common people is true faith. There is one more thinker we can have a look at who had a unique reaction to his perceived meaninglessness and absurdity of life. Albert Camus is most well known for his absurdist philosophical ideas, primarily through his essay, The Myth of Sisyphus, which arguably founded the idea of absurdism. Camus explains how the human experience is absurd due to man's pursuit for meaning in a universe that does not care about man's goals. Like Tolstoy, Camus determined that the realization of this leaves man with 3 choices. 1. Unaliving yourself, again, as you find life utterly meaningless. 2. Religious belief in a higher purpose. And 3. Acceptance of the absurd, in living on in rebellion of it. Camus explains that the unaliving yourself option is the most basic option, and does not recommend it as he believes it simply escapes from the absurd. Camus' ideas about religious belief are also similar to that of Kierkegaard's, in that a leap of faith must be taken in order to crush the absurd. However, this is where the similarities between Camus and the previous thinkers we have looked at stop. Camus sees the leap of faith as philosophical suicide, believing that it disregards not only the absurd, but also rational thinking, as it is ignoring the philosophical standards for faith in something that he sees as irrational. As such, rather than looking towards religion, Camus believes that recognition of the absurd and the rebellion of it is the best way to live, and that religion and unaliving are mere attempts at escaping the absurd rather than facing it. He believes that this recognition grants us true freedom, as we can then think for ourselves and find our own meaning. Paradoxically, one must accept the absurdity of searching for meaning in a world that lacks any, and still search for it anyway. The lack of religion and Camus' statements that the absurd man can do whatever he wants has led some to be opposed to absurdism, as it lacks a reason to live morally. And in The Myth of Sisyphus, Camus even explains how the absurd man is amoral, not immoral, but that he is guided by his integrity and not morality. Camus proposes 3 characteristics that define the absurd man: revolt, or not accepting any answers that escape the absurd; freedom, being able to do what we want and think how we choose; and passion, or pursuing the things we want most in life to live fruitfully and with diverse experiences. Furthermore, Camus provides 4 examples of archetypes of living in the absurd. Firstly, the Don Juan, or the seducer. The seducer collects as many experiences as possible, pursuing the passion of the moment, loving as many and as much as possible. While his actions may not be very moral, he prefers it to a life that oppresses both him and his partner. Next is the actor, who concentrates the lives and passions of many and takes on their roles. The third is the conqueror, who seeks action both in the form of adventures and also in political action. And the final is the artist, who creates entire worlds outside of the absurd. However, I think the best and most applicable framework of the absurd man is in Camus' final part of his Myth of Sisyphus essay, and that is in his idea of Sisyphus himself. I'm sure by now many understand the myth and Camus' interpretation, but I'll repeat it once again. In Greek mythology, Sisyphus, for rebelling against Zeus by cheating death, is punished to eternally push a great boulder up a hill only for it to fall back down near the top. Camus articulates that we should envision Sisyphus as happy, taking joy in his fate, for this joy defiantly strips the gods of their power, overcoming the suffering enforced upon him. Maybe we should all take on this outlook of life, and smile at life's tragedies. Maybe we should devote our lives to our passions, or maybe we should find religion. It's all up to you. Personally, I enjoy Camus' ideas, and they help me get out of existential ruts sometimes, but researching other people's conclusions is fascinating as well. Thanks for watching. Subscribe if you want some more deep dives into some of my weird questions, and please comment or join the Discord to let me know if I got anything wrong, or if you have some different interpretations. I'm a novice at this kind of thing. My brain comes up with strange questions, so sometimes I use books and the internet to answer them, and I throw my answers onto the internet in hopes that it might help someone else. So, if I am wrong, please let me know so I can help myself and potentially others.